I work at a half-priced voodoo store. Part 4. Written by Voodoo Clerk. So at this point, I'm pretty sure you guys have a pretty good grasp on what King Creole is like as a boss. He's creepy, and a murderer by most definition of the law, right? I mean, the button eyes and the sewn-up mouth should have been a dead giveaway to that. Well, he has ways of surprising you. Like some of you pointed out, he defended me during the robbery and the runaway convict situation. That alone sort of tipped the scales to him being pretty alright. Well, something happened a few days ago that really changed my perspective on him. It was a lazy Saturday. I was leaning back on my newly upgraded rocking chair. That's right, folks. No more crappy stool. Old buddy boy Travis has a rocking chair now. Take that, desk jockeys. Anyway, I was rocking on the chair, enjoying how good it felt to have back support, when the rusty doorbell rang. I looked over at the door and saw that nobody was there. Odd, but not out of the ordinary in this place. I figured it was some ghost or something. Until I heard the sounds of tiny straining, and a little hand came up from the other side of the counter. I raised my brow at that, and quickly looked to the wall of voodoo dolls. Had one escaped again? I thought to myself, but my train of thought was derailed when a childlike voice pulled my attention back over. "Excuse me," the voice asked, innocent and just a little shy. I stood up from my rocking chair and looked over the counter to see a little girl standing there all by herself. She had to have been in second or even first grade. Her little hands quickly went behind her back when she looked up at me. Hello, little girl. Are you lost?" I asked her, looking around the shop for any sign of a parental figure. It didn't take me too long, considering how small the place is. "I want a wish," she said softly, looking up at me and giving me a soft pout. The kind a kid gives when they expect the answer to be no, but they still want to shoot their shot. Oh, let me go get my boss, okay?" I said to her. I wasn't exactly trained to handle children, much less one looking to ask for a wish. And having seen my fair share of wishes in this place, I almost wanted to talk her out of it. But a job is a job. Turning to go to Creel's office, I was surprised to see him already leaving it. "Ah, Travis, my boy," he said with a hum, pulling on his suit to straighten it out and patting some dust off of it. "I need you to watch the shop while he began to say, but his button eyes quickly turned to see the little girl standing at the counter, who was too busy looking up the wall of voodoo dolls to notice us. "Well, I'll be," he said in a bewildered voice. "Yeah, she came in here asking for a wish. I was just about to come and get you," I explained, looking back over to the mystery girl. She was busy, looking wide-eyed at all the dolls available. It was like she had never seen a toy before. "A wish, huh?" he asked with a hum, walking over to the little girl and clearing his throat. "Oh, little Miss Olivia?" he asked, bending down to his knees to get on her level. The little girl turned around and, to my surprise, didn't flinch at all at King Creole's appearance. In fact, she had stars in her eyes when she saw him. "Are you the wish man?" she asked quickly and excitedly. "Why, I do believe I am," he responded after a chuckle and a smile. This smile was different from the one he usually wore. His normal smile always gave off an air of creepy judgment, like someone knowing the person that they were talking to was inferior. But his smile this time seemed genuine. "Can you grant me a wish?" the girl named Olivia, as you heard before, asked quietly, looking up to the voodoo man with all the passion a girl at her age could have. Hell, I wanted to grant her a wish just from that. "I'm afraid you're too young, darling. I can't in good conscience grant you a wish," Creole said sadly, taking off his hat as if in a silent apology. You could see Olivia's heartbreak clear on her face. She drooped like a dying flower immediately, her arms behind her back coming to the surface, and that's when I noticed all of the bruises on them. Creole saw them as well. His attention turned to it, and he took the girl by the arm, gently lifting her tiny pale and bruised arm up, and looked at her. "Who did this to you?" he asked softly. Olivia looked like she was holding back the floodgates, and they finally broke as she started crying and hiccuping, using her free arm to wipe her face as she cried, but she managed to blurt out an answer to Creole. "My mommy." As if on cue, the front door slammed open, nearly breaking a shelf near it as the woman came into the shop. I could tell she was Olivia's mother by the resemblance of her to her crying daughter. "Olivia, what the hell are you doing in this place?" she demanded to know, coming over with a look of rage on her face. "Wow, calm down there, darling. Little Miss Olivia was simply asking for a wish was all," Creole said, springing up and quickly pushing Olivia behind him. I acted as well, motioning for the girl to come over to be behind the counter. She reacted accordingly, coming over to me and hugging my pants leg. "She shouldn't have left where I told her to stay," the woman spat in my boss's face. I could smell the alcohol on her from here. Figures. "I'm not paying for whatever she asked for. Olivia, get your ass over here and get in the car," she screamed in my direction. I reached a hand down and patted the girl's head as she shivered violently against me. "I assure you, ma'am, you don't have to pay for anything," Creole hummed, holding his hands up defensively against the woman's gabs and accusations. "Why, all she asked for was a doll, and I'm mighty inclined to get her one." Fixing his tie as he walked past the angry mother, he walked over to the wall of voodoo dolls and hummed as he looked up at the wall, pointing his finger out as if trying to find the right one, and snapping when he found it. Reaching out, he took the correct doll and brushed it off, blowing on it and sending the dust in the mother's face, which sent her into a coughing fit. I smiled at that, seeing my boss stand up for this poor girl. "Miss Olivia," he asked her as he walked over and past the sputtering mother. He once again got down on her level and revealed the doll to her. It was a small one, about the size of my forearm. It was dressed in a black Victorian gown and had hair to match, along with the button eyes of all the dolls we had in the store. Olivia, pulling herself away from my leg, looked at the doll with awe. Sniffling, she held both of her bruised arms out. King Creole carefully gave her the doll and smiled as she looked at it, brushing the doll's hair and quickly giving it a hug. "Thank you," she said softly, clinging to the item as she walked away from the counter and to her mother. "That thing better not have any fleas," she hissed, turning and grabbing Olivia's little arm and yanking her along. Olivia gave one last forlorn look as she was dragged away, the sad rusty bell jingling as they both left. I looked over to my boss, who was clearly as upset as I was. That scene was more difficult for me than all the bad wishes I had ever seen working here, because of how hopeless it all seemed. As if reading my mind, Creole put his hand on my shoulder and forced my gaze to look into his button eyes. "She'll be fine, son. I assure you of that," he said, nodding to me and tussling my hair, sighing as he let me go and started back to his office. The thing in the basement began banging on the door as he walked past it, causing him to freeze in place. He looked to the door with a clenched fist and punched it. "Shut up! You're never leaving that place!" He screamed at the door, his mouth wide as he gritted his teeth. A few of his stitches ripped, causing him to cover his mouth and walk over to his office, slamming the door behind with a loud bang, leaving me alone with the uneasy feeling of being all alone in the shop. The rest of the day was hard to get through. All I could think about was poor Olivia and her mother. I sighed as I sat back in my rocking chair. Not much I could do. I didn't know her last name, so I couldn't report her to CPS. So I resigned myself to listen to King Creole, who has never steered me wrong. Only 2 other customers came in that day, and all they wanted was a wart removal potion and a heart attack potion. Don't ask. As I unpinned my pin from the doll on the counter, I looked over to Creole's office, walking over to it as I knocked 3 times. Not hearing anything from inside, I opened the door and poked my head in, seeing Creole at his desk sewing a doll, obviously lost in whatever thoughts were dancing around in that head of his. "Sir, I'm gonna head home," I said, breaking his concentration as he lifted his head to look up at me. He looked confused for a second, looking over to the clock on his wall and nodding, seemingly realizing what time was. "Right. Yes. See you tomorrow, Travis," he said like a robot. He turned back to the doll he had been sewing and said nothing more to me. I nodded and turned to leave, letting the door to his office close behind me. Walking away from his office, I stopped at the basement door, reaching into my pocket and pulling out that single shard of porcelain I had kept all of this time. I rubbed my finger over it and looked to the door. "Please, let me out." The voice of a woman came from behind the door. No pounding this time, just a soft and desperate voice of a woman. She had a southern accent, but it sounded far away, like if she were talking to me from a hallway. I didn't answer. All I did was place the shard of porcelain at the foot of the door and slowly push it underneath the crack, turning and leaving for the day. I got home and hugged my mom, just to thank whatever being there is out there for giving me loving parents. The next day, I still had Olivia in my mind, but I mostly resigned myself to just get through another day of work. Walking into the shop, I saw King Creole standing at the counter, an amused look on his pale face. His smile only grew as I got closer. "Good morning, sir," I said, and the look that he was giving me gave me a sharp chill up my spine. "Travis, my boy, did you try sneaking this underneath the door?" he asked sweetly as honey, lifting up a shard of porcelain I had tried to sneak underneath the basement door. I audibly swallowed and nodded. I was just trying to... I don't know, I thought..." I stammered, trying to give him the reason behind my apparent crime. "Travis, Travis, Travis," he hissed, walking out from behind the counter and closer to me. He grabbed me by the collar and pulled me close to him, his smile turning into a scowl that turned my blood into ice. "Don't ever fucking give her anything. Am I understood?" he growled, his yellow teeth sharpened as he spoke. I almost shit and pissed myself at his demeanor. I quickly nodded, shivering as hard as a human being could. "Yes, sir, I promise," I stuttered out, breathing hard once he released me, his smile returning and his teeth going back to normal. "Wonderful. Now you better clock in. I'm expecting a very fun appointment today," he hummed, spinning around on his heels and walking to his office. Walking past the basement door and into his office, letting the door close behind him. Puffing hard, I walked to my rocking chair and sat myself down, stabbing the doll in the head and rubbing my face hard. Last time I would ever even look at that basement door if that's how he reacted to me just returning something to it. Maybe an hour or 2 into my shift, my phone usage was interrupted by the front door flying open. The rusty bell nearly flew off from its place as the door swung open and shut afterwards. I looked up and dropped my phone when I saw it was Olivia's mom, although she looked a little paler. Her skin looked like Creole's. "What the fuck did you give her?" she shouted as she stumbled to the counter, hacking and coughing violently, collapsing onto her knees just near me and looking up at me, sending me flying further from my chair. She had one eye dangling from its socket, and the other one looked as if it was made of milk chocolate and had started to melt. She clawed her nails into the counter and pulled herself up, feeling around and grabbing my arm, pulling me close to her. I don't know, man. I just work here," was all I could offer the woman, trying to get away from her as one of the eyes fell out with a gross-sounding plop. She recoiled and stumbled backwards, gasping and coughing, white, puffy stuff coming out of her mouth and falling into the floor, and I knew what it was instantly. It was doll stuffing. "Goodness, you are early," Creole's cheery voice came, turning to see that he was standing in his office door. He strode his way over to the woman and grabbed her by her hair, pulling it upwards so he could have a look into her eye sockets. "Now, dear, we can't have you losing your stuffing," he chuckled, producing some thread and a needle. "What the fuck did you do to me?" she shouted, shoving him away from her and trying to stumble away, only for her legs to buckle underneath her like a fucking accordion. Humans aren't meant to bend that way if you didn't know. "Dear me, you're changing much faster than I first thought you would," Creole chuckled, grabbing the woman again and yanking her up. I was still in shock at all of this by this point. The woman's skin looked like some of the dolls we sell, and that's when it clicked for me. She was turning into a doll. "Sir?" I spoke up, flinching when Creole slammed the woman onto my counter and started sewing her mouth shut, despite the woman's thrashing and quickly impinging appendages. He looked over to me with a quizzical look and smiled. "Be a good boy and hold her down, Travis," he asked with a chuckle, continuing to sew her mouth up. I looked to her and swallowed as I walked forward and quickly gripped her arms, already feeling that there was not an ounce of bone left in them. All I could feel was doll stuffing. I closed my eyes and held her down. I'm not proud of this moment. When he was finished and finally allowed me to let go, King Creole gave her the finishing touches, sewing buttons into her empty eye sockets and smiling as he wiped his gloved hands clean. "Her present is all done. Just gotta wait for her to shrink," he chuckled, looking at me with an excited smile. I gave him a confused look, my eyes wandering down to the body. It was dead still and looked very much like she belonged in the morgue. The more I looked, though, the more I realized that she was shrinking, inch by inch. Well, at least I know where some of the voodoo dolls come from now. I was left in charge of the doll while I waited for this mystery guest of his. I already had an inkling who it was for, but with King Creole, you never know what to expect. But I sat and watched as the fully grown woman shrunk down to the size of a child, then to a toddler, then to the size of my forearm. And she was a doll, through and through. I lifted her up and looked at her, waggled her around, and finally left her on the counter. When the door opened again, the first thing I saw was a woman in Victorian-style dress coming close to me, her hands clasped in front of her and looking at me with a warm and motherly smile. "Good day, shopkeep. I do believe my daughter would like to speak with you," she asked in a soft British accent. I looked at her, and my jaw hit the floor. She was the doll that King Creole had given to Olivia. As if to reinforce this point, a tiny hand came up to pull on the big black dress. The woman looked down and smiled, leaning over and lifting up the thing the tiny arm was attached to. "Where's Mr. King Creole?" Olivia asked with her big old happy eyes. I looked at her, and then at this woman who just yesterday had been a doll. Looking back at Olivia, I opened my mouth to say something, but I was quickly cut off by Creole's office door opening, and the voodoo man smiled so much I thought he was going to burst a stitch. "My darling Olivia, how are you?" He asked this like Olivia was a friend he hadn't seen in forever. At his voice, Olivia smiled as wide as he, and the woman put her down, letting her run up to my boss and giving his legs a hug. "Thank you so much for my new mommy," she said, nuzzling her face into him. He chuckled and knelt down a bit, patting her head and motioning me to come over. I took the doll off the counter and came over, getting on my knees with an old man grunt, and handed the doll to Olivia. She gasped and happily accepted it, wrapping her tiny arms around it and thanking Creole a million times. When all was said and done, Olivia said her goodbyes, and her new mother took her by the hand and led her out of the door. This new mother turning around and waving goodbye to us and over to the voodoo dolls, who all waved back. I do love happy endings, Creole sighed, taking his hat off and rubbing his messy black hair, turning to me and raising a brow to my obvious uncomfortableness over the whole situation. Don't worry, son. She's in the best possible hands, he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. Sir, how come you didn't hurt her? I asked, going back to all the times he had caused horrible things to happen to anybody seemingly needing his help. He looked at me as if I had spoken Chinese to him. Son, my mama always said, help those that truly need it. Can you stand here and tell me she didn't need our help? He asked, patting my shoulder and heading over to his office, leaving me with that train of thought for the rest of the day as I washed away all the blood left over from the old mother. King Creole is a strange man. He went from wanting to kill me for going near the basement door to hugging a child that he had saved from an abusive mother. I still deal with the back and forth of his personality. I don't think I will ever understand him, but I don't ever expect to. All I want to know is, what is in the basement that causes him so much rage? Hey there, everybody. I want to say thank you so much for clicking on my video and listening to the story all the way to the end. If you like this story and you want to hear more like it, feel free to go to my page and look at all the videos I've posted so far. But if you want to be notified when the next part of this story or any other video I have comes out, hit that notification bell. I want to hear your thoughts. I'm confused as to why Travis is still working in this place. Why does King Creole have such a soft spot for children? Who is in the basement that ticks him off so much? Are all the dolls made from people who have done horrible things? And if so, how do they go about changing and being accepted by other people? Is it a sort of trial? Is it like prison and they're reformed now? I want to hear your thoughts and opinions and theories, so comment them down below and I will try my best to interact with everybody as soon as I possibly can. So until next time, everybody, be safe out there.